How does our ever-shifting world translate into what we know and love to be our cinema? This is how the journey of globalization and cinema can be seen to play a major role in the media we consume every day. Well, you may be wondering, what is globalization anyway? Google tells us that it is the process by which organizations develop international influence or start operating on an international scale. Professor of Cultural Sociology John Tomlinson believes that globalization lies at the heart of modern culture, and cultural practices lie at the heart of globalization. While these two explanations can seem to depict aspects from opposite ends of the spectrum, there's one thing that they both have in common: the world and its interconnecting parts. Thus, it's safe to say that globalization is all about the interactions between countries and cultures. So, what has this got to do with cinema? Picture this. You walk to your local cinema to watch a film, or perhaps something on TV. What do you find? Chances are the content you're watching has been influenced by multiple cultures and film industries from all over the world. We see The Simpsons on Australian TV. 2013 sci-fi film Pacific Rim was predominantly set in Hong Kong, and Bollywood-inspired British film Slumdog Millionaire took global cinema by storm in 2008. But none of this great artistry in film would have even existed without the emulsion of cultures and art forms through globalization. And even within Australia, we can see the great impact of globalization reflected in our cinema, as it acts as a prime platform for society to explore the changes of a modern world. But was Australian cinema always this globally invested? Prior to World War I, Australian film existed as a small developing industry. Having been colonised by the Brits, it's no wonder that our cinema was largely influenced by British film. That is, until the first Hollywood box office opened in America in the early 20th century. Since then, American film has dominated most of the market, with Hollywood having represented 60% of the film's industry's revenue by 1997. You can only imagine what it is today. And so Americanization, which is the large importation of US local culture, became a common phenomenon, which has threatened many other smaller film industries.
That's where globalization comes in. Globalization has created a large impact on national culture and culture as a global entity. Throughout the past century, Bollywood, Europa, and Hong Kong cinema are just some other film industries that have risen and steadily influenced movies from all around the world. For example, the Hong Kong New Wave that occurred during the 1980s to 1990s was a movement that changed the face of not only Chinese cinema, but allowed other film industries, including Hollywood, to experience new cultural dimensions through its exploitation genre. While Western films allowed Hong Kong to have creative freedom to explore new themes such as sexuality, films that centered around provocative concepts of drugs, crime, and sex innovated and changed the Hollywood box office forever. An example of these new wave films is by the Chinese director Wong Kar-wai, whose films are known for their bold confrontation of social issues. One of his most notable films, Happy Together, which explores a gay couple's move to Uruguay and their turbulent relationship, draws greatly from European cinema in its non-linear narrative style and pessimistic tone to human connection. However, there seems to be growing consensus that globalization is actually guised as imperialism, cultural imperialism more specifically. This idea was first developed by a mid-1900s French philosopher called Michel Foucault. Foucault's position on this was that power is directly linked to the control of people's knowledge, and that systematic change imposed by governments had to be done through culture and other institutions. And this is evident when we see how aggressive Western culture is through cinema. Aside from having dominance over mainstream culture through the major studios of Fox, Warner Brothers, and Disney, who hold 89% of the market, Hollywood focuses on glorifying war. Movies like American Sniper, Bridge of Spies, all portray the everyday man who become heroes through serving their country. Realistically, films that simplify the premise of good and evil, known as high-concept films, establish people's perceptions that America is the foundation of the world's morals and that the military is somehow a symbol of freedom.
This especially extends to the superhero phenomenon. Take a look at any Marvel film that you see. The same formula is applied. This time, however, they are given godlike statures, dressed in capes, holding shields, but ultimately under the power of government. Mark Tupelo, who is an author in film culture, argues that superheroes are easily exploited as propaganda, and now supports the excesses of American imperialism. Now compare this to Australia. Think about it for a second. What was the last Australian film you watched? It's hard to answer. Then how about this? Try and identify the last Australian character you saw in a film. For the majority of you, it was probably Captain Boomerang in Suicide Squad. The list goes on with cliched Australian character portrayals who act as minor characters and serve as the comic relief of the movie, often ignorant to their surroundings. They followed the defined character trope of being a larrikin and exaggerating the exploitation comedy, as seen by their apathy to any real concerns. The Australian stereotype has never really developed beyond that, and the world cannot really identify what Australian culture actually stands for, let alone ourselves. Whether you agree with the skepticism or not, the idea of globalization has profoundly changed in the past decade. No longer are we enthusiastic to breach cultural boundaries and exchange ideas with one another, but protecting ourselves and our ideology seems to be a recurrent contemporary theme. With the fallout of Brexit and prejudicial tensions rising between religions, it seems there is an overall feeling of alienation in the global community. This being said, the evolution of cinema owes itself a lot to globalization. From early films to contemporary mixtures of culture, cinema has gone far in reflecting how this world is changing every day. And who knows, soon we may be able to see more films being inspired by what Australia has to offer.